At 6:42 a.m., my dog barked. By 6:44, the county's emergency network was down. Cause? One Karen, one clipboard, one pair of shears. She claimed the wire clashed with the mulch. What she didn't realize? She just committed a felony in beige activewear. This isn't just an HOA story. This is suburban warfare, powered by pettiness and perfectly trimmed hedges. It was 6:42 a.m. in Oakview Ridge, Colorado. The sky was still pale and the air smelled like pine mulch and sprinkler mist. I was on my porch sipping my first coffee of the day, and my dog Moose was curled up like a furry doormat beside me. Everything felt unusually calm. No cars, no leaf blowers, no one walking around in tennis visors pretending they didn't notice your trash bins were out an hour too early. Just peace, that rare kind of quiet that makes you suspicious something's about to go terribly wrong. I'm Ethan Harper. I manage part of the county's emergency infrastructure network. Doesn't sound flashy, I know. But when storms knock out cell towers or wildfires chew through communication lines, I'm one of the guys making sure rescue teams stay connected. My home isn't just a house. It's a hardened emergency relay node, redundant power, shielded fiber uplink, satellite fallback, not your average suburban Wi-Fi setup. That morning, we were running a routine wildfire evacuation drill, a simulation. I was rerouting paramedic traffic across 3 counties, watching status lights blink green across every node, and then all at once, they didn't. The screen in my home office flashed blood red. Fiber uplink disconnected. Emergency node failure. Good luck. I wish I were joking. That was the actual message. 1 second, I was tracking a fire crew moving through canyon switchbacks, and the next, total blackout. No uplink, no signals, no fallback. Moose barked from the back door. Something was wrong outside. I sprinted out across the yard and rounded the corner toward the utility box, heart pounding. And there she was, Karen Bancroft, head of the HOA and self-appointed defender of neighborhood aesthetics, wearing a beige windbreaker, her sunglasses pushed up like a tiara, and in her right hand a pair of garden shears. The smugness on her face could sour milk. She looked at me like I had trespassed on her lawn. "You're lucky I left your bushes," she said, not even pretending to care. "But that wire?" I looked down. The emergency fiber optic cable, clearly labeled county registered, was sliced clean in half, the ends curled like burnt spaghetti. "That's not just internet," I said slowly. "That's a county emergency relay." Karen shrugged. "It didn't match the HOA landscaping guide. Besides, your Netflix can wait." I didn't say a word. I just turned and ran back inside, flipping my system to satellite mode. Latency through the roof, bandwidth a joke, but it worked, barely. Within minutes, alerts flooded in, 1 rescue team stranded between ridge lines, another ambulance had missed a GPS update, 5 minutes of silence. That's all it took. 5 minutes of dead air caused by 1 pair of garden shears and a woman who thought fiber optics were a landscaping nuisance. The worst part? She wasn't clueless. She knew. She just didn't care. That's when I realized Karen hadn't just cut a wire. She had declared war, and I wasn't about to lose to a woman whose biggest emergency until now was a neighbor planting the wrong species of hydrangea. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of fear. Adrenaline had long burned that away, but out of calculation. I spent hours combing through footage, freezing frames of Karen mid-snip, capturing the precise second her shears severed the county's main artery. Every time I looked at her face, I saw no confusion, no hesitation, just that signature Karen smugness, the kind you'd expect from someone who corrects your mailbox font while calling the cops about it. She knew. She absolutely knew. And yet I also knew something else. People like her never stop at the first offense. No, Karen didn't just want to punish. She wanted to erase. So I set up backup logs, extra cameras, even a false uplink node buried near the gardenia bushes. If she wanted to escalate, I was going to meet her there, with more precision than she could ever imagine. The next morning, she struck again. Not with shears this time, but with stationery. Folded neatly into my mailbox like a death threat from Martha Stewart was a printed HOA bulletin, complete with her signature floral watermark and the subject line in all caps, "Unauthorized equipment found in community." Below, a paragraph-long rant accused an unnamed homeowner, spoiler alert, me, of installing covert surveillance hardware disguised as landscaping utilities. She even included a blurry, overzoomed photo of my relay box with red arrows, circles, and one massive label that read, "Possible EMF emitter." I blinked twice. EMF emitter? The relay had less radiation than a toaster, but I knew what this was. Karen was flipping the narrative before it flipped her. This wasn't a warning, it was a setup. I walked outside, and sure enough, a few neighbors glanced at me differently. The kind of look you get when someone's read a chain email about you being a government sleeper agent. One woman, who used to wave when I walked Moose, now crossed the street. Another neighbor, Jim, who I once helped reboot his router, avoided eye contact entirely. That was Karen's real power, not her clipboard, not even her seat on the HOA. That was her ability to inject suspicion just loud enough to become believable. She didn't need to win an argument. She just needed to make people feel uneasy. And for a few hours, I almost let it get to me. Almost. But then something changed. Around 5 p.m., while I was rechecking my uplink shielding, someone knocked on my door. It was Ruth, soft-spoken, cardigan-wearing Ruth from Lot 28, also on the HOA board and until now firmly in the background. She looked like she had just walked through a tornado made of emails. "You need to see this," she said, handing me a manila envelope. Inside were printed copies of internal HOA emails, some from Karen, some to her. The language started off vague and polished, but grew more aggressive with each page. One email, addressed to a local landscaping company, requested they remove that strange shed with wires near Unit 14 if it becomes an issue. Another detailed a list of homes contributing to aesthetic decay, mine highlighted in yellow. But one message stopped me cold. Karen emailing someone named Marcus asking if he could gather leverage in case the county pushed back. Marcus, that name wasn't in any HOA file I'd seen. I didn't know it yet, but that name would change everything. It would turn this from HOA drama to potential criminal conspiracy. I looked up from the printout and asked Ruth, "Who is Marcus?" Her answer was barely a whisper. "Her boyfriend, or something close. He runs a security company." Suddenly, the phony inspector visit, the wire cutting, the smear campaign, they weren't random. They were coordinated, calculated. Karen hadn't just declared war on my Weilers. She was building a case to replace me entirely, one slanderous flyer and phony violation at a time. And Marcus? He wasn't just some boyfriend. He had been denied a county infrastructure contract 2 years prior for failing security standards. Now he was back, and he had Karen's HOA to run his second act. I stared at the printout in my hands, my brain rewiring faster than the uplink I'd spent the night protecting. If they were planning something bigger, they wouldn't stop at shears and bulletins. They'd come back. But next time, I'd be ready, with bait. I barely had time to digest what Ruth told me before the front motion alert chimed. A white pickup truck had pulled up across the street, idling just past the fire hydrant, like it didn't belong, but wanted you to think it did. 2 men stepped out, both wearing beige jackets with poorly sewn patches that read HOA Compliance. One carried a clipboard, the other had a tool bag. My gut dropped. Karen hadn't wasted a single day. This was her next move, and she wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. I watched through the window as they began pacing along my front yard, pointing at the junction box near the driveway and taking notes like they were inspecting a crime scene. Except these weren't inspectors, these weren't even actors. They were something worse. Amateurs with just enough fake authority to be dangerous. I stepped outside and walked up to him, calm but direct. "Can I help you?" I asked, already filming on my phone. Clipboard guy fumbled with his papers. "Community inspection," he muttered, not looking me in the eye. "Due to a recent HOA complaint," I asked, "what department, what jurisdiction?" He blinked. His partner looked at his phone like he'd had the answers. They gave me a name that didn't match any local agency, then claimed they were sub. When I asked for ID, they hesitated. That's when I saw it on the sleeve of tool bag guy's jacket. A faint logo I recognized from Ruth's email thread. Marcus's company. Private security. The kind that pitched themselves as urban risk mitigation, but mostly offered muscle under the guise of HOA compliance checks. I told them they were trespassing, and if they didn't leave, I'd call the sheriff. They left without another word. Back inside, I called Dana my liaison at County Emergency Infrastructure. When she answered, I gave her the short version: fake inspectors, no IDs, private security patch, likely sent by Marcus. She went silent for a moment and then said, "You're not going to like this." According to her, Marcus had pitched a private emergency mesh network system to the county the year before. His bid was rejected due to multiple code violations and failure to meet even the basic security criteria. He'd been blacklisted for misuse of federal recovery funds during a post-storm cleanup. And now, she added, he's trying to create a problem big enough to get us replaced. Meaning, they wanted my node to fail repeatedly, publicly, dramatically, so they could pitch their version of the system as the fix. And Karen, she was greasing the wheels from the inside, using HOA authority to make my setup look like a liability. I didn't just feel manipulated, I felt like a loose bolt in someone else's contract. That night, I didn't sleep again, but this time I wasn't reacting, I was preparing. I stayed up wiring a decoy relay unit from an old modem shell, housed it in a gray utility box, and placed it strategically along the side of my house, just visible enough to tempt attention. I labeled it Experimental Relay, Do Not Tamper, in bright red letters. Inside was nothing. It was a prop, no data, no line, just bait. I rerouted all sensitive infrastructure inside, shielded and logged with passive sensors. Every signal, every ping, every attempted access would now be recorded. I didn't know when Marcus or Karen's lackeys would return, but I knew they would. I was no longer defending my network. I was setting a trap. I didn't have to wait long. 2 nights later, my motion sensor lit up at 2:14 a.m. Emming. A figure crept along the hedges, crouched near the dummy box, and pulled out a small multi-tool. The footage from my birdhouse cam was grainy at first, but as the IR filter clicked in, I saw him clearly. Marcus. Same haircut, same jawline, from his company's pitch deck. He clipped one of the decoy wires, hesitated, confused when nothing happened, then walked away. 10 minutes later, I caught a login attempt from an unrecognized MAC address pinging my system. Logged it, cross-referenced it, matched it with a testing device previously registered to Marcus's company, and just like that, I had him. Caught not only tampering, but digitally breaching an active county emergency node. I compiled the footage, access logs, and timestamped cross data into a single file. Then I titled it exactly what it was, Your Smoking Gun, and I sent it to Dana. The reply came within 5 minutes. We're taking this to legal, she said. The state's going to want a word. The morning after I sent Dana the smoking gun, the neighborhood felt sharper, not louder, not busier, just more alert. People moved differently. Lawns were being trimmed with military precision. Garage doors opened just wide enough for people to slide in and vanish. The HOA bulletin board had a new flyer, of course. This time it wasn't just a passive-aggressive announcement, it was a declaration. Emergency session, community safety concerns regarding rogue technology operators, in bold underlined font with a red warning triangle that looked suspiciously like a biohazard symbol. Below that, Karen had posted doctored photos of my house, filters turned up, angles warped to make it look like a secret government bunker, wires glowing with false red highlights. One photo was labeled Experimental Radiation Node, another unknown surveillance feed, source undisclosed. She had even cited an independent safety review, which after 5 minutes of Googling turned out to be a defunct blog hosted on a free domain from 2007. But the real kicker, the claim that my equipment was linked to plant decay due to electromagnetic soil disruption. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or file a defamation suit. Still, I knew her endgame, flood the community with fear and make me the scapegoat. That's why I wasn't surprised when a second flyer appeared the next day. This one proposed a vote, an amendment to the HOA bylaws that would ban non-decorative utility structures from front and side yards. No exceptions. The timing wasn't a coincidence. If passed, it would retroactively criminalize my entire relay system. She didn't need legal truth, she just needed HOA technicality. Karen was trying to legislate me out of the neighborhood, rule by rule, until I either gave up or gave in. But what she didn't count on, what she never counts on, was people remembering and speaking. It started with Carlos. Ex-military, kept to himself, barely nodded when we crossed paths, but when I ran into him that evening while walking moose, he surprised me. "She did it to me too," he said. I paused. "What?" He pointed to the antenna on his roof. "Ham radio, used for emergency storm updates. She tried to make me tear it down last hurricane season, claimed it violated height codes. I had to get FEMA involved just to shut her up." My head spun. Karen had a pattern, a dangerous one. She didn't just hate wires, she hated infrastructure. Anything she didn't understand, she tried to eliminate. And she always struck during critical periods: storms, drills, fire season, when people were too distracted to fight back. Word spread fast after that. A nurse approached me about her medical freezer, which runs on a generator during outages. Karen had tried to fine her for excessive noise pollution. A firefighter had been scolded for installing a thermal cam above his garage. Intimidating optics, Karen called it. A teacher who'd rigged up a satellite classroom during COVID hit with a citation for visual obstruction. In every case, she'd push the same narrative: safety hazard, aesthetic violation, neighborhood integrity. But now residents were starting to realize it wasn't about beauty, it was about control. And for the first time, they started pushing back. I compiled their stories into a single report, time-stamped and annotated, then forwarded it to Dana. Her response was immediate. "This isn't HOA mismanagement. This is obstruction with a historical pattern. We're assigning a case investigator." It was happening, finally. But as satisfying as that moment was, I knew we weren't done. Karen still had one move left, one she had been building toward since the first flyer. The HOA emergency session was tomorrow night. The agenda listed one item: disciplinary action against me for failure to comply with community safety standards. I looked at the notice, then looked at the footage of Marcus cutting my fake node. I smiled. Let him try. Because this time, I wasn't just bringing receipts, I was bringing witnesses. The day after the flyer proposing the bylaw amendment dropped, I noticed something strange. People had stopped pretending not to notice. For months, the neighborhood lived under Karen's spell, her bulletins, her complaints, her whispers that turned into rumors. But now, there was hesitation in the way people looked at the notice board. A pause, a doubt. And that pause cracked everything wide open. It started with Carlos, quiet guy, ex-military, lived 2 houses down. We rarely spoke beyond the occasional head nod while mowing the lawn. But that morning he stopped me mid-walk with moose. "You know," he said, "Karen pulled the same stunt on me last hurricane season." I blinked. "What stunt?" He pointed up at a small radio antenna on his roof. "My ham radio tower, FEMA certified, fully legal. She claimed it violated height codes, tried to get the HOA to vote it down, said it was too tactical for suburban harmony." He chuckled dryly. "I had to fax FEMA just to shut her up." That's when I knew she wasn't just targeting me, she had a history. Within 48 hours, stories began surfacing like bodies in a drain lake. A nurse who ran a vaccine cooler off a backup generator during blackouts, fined for non-conforming equipment. A firefighter who installed a thermal cam near his garage, reported for intimidating optics. A public school teacher who set up a temporary satellite classroom during COVID, labeled a visual disruption, in each case the same: technical, legal, helpful, and flagged by Karen as a threat to neighborhood harmony. She wasn't protecting the HOA. She was actively dismantling anything she didn't understand, and now, for the first time, people were starting to realize it. So I got to work. I compiled every story, every citation, every time-stamped HOA notice. I labeled it "Pattern of Targeted Infrastructure Obstruction, Oak View Ridge." I included my own incident with footage, login attempts, and the email chain Ruth had handed over. Then I sent it all to Dana at County Emergency Services. Her reply was short but fierce. "This is no longer just HOA overreach. This is strategic interference. We're opening a county-level case." That sentence hit like a cold spark. Karen had crossed out of HOA bylaws and into state code, and she didn't even know it. But just because the county was involved didn't mean Karen was backing down. Quite the opposite. That afternoon, we received another bulletin. Emergency HOA session. One agenda item: disciplinary action against Ethan Harper for unauthorized tech infrastructure. She wasn't just doubling down, she was launching her final move, a public vote, a character assassination, an official expulsion wrapped in HOA language. But what Karen didn't know was that while she was building a slideshow of paranoia and fake ordinances, I was assembling something stronger, witnesses. I knocked on every door, not with anger, not with fear, with clarity. I showed them what Karen cut. I explained what the node did. I shared what could have happened if my backup system hadn't kicked in. And one by one, people who had been too scared or too tired or too numb started to speak. Carlos agreed to attend the meeting. So did the nurse, the firefighter, even the teacher. We weren't just defending a wire anymore. We were defending something Karen had never valued, community function over facade. And this time the room wouldn't be silent, it would echo. The night of the HOA emergency session arrived like a courtroom drama with terrible lighting and too much perfume. The clubhouse was packed, more people than I'd seen at any HOA event, maybe ever. Some sat stiffly with crossed arms, others looked genuinely confused about why they were there. Karen, of course, had center stage. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit that practically glowed under the overhead fluorescence, her hair perfectly stiff like it had been spray lacquered into place. Beside her sat two board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, and behind her, a projector screen with the words, Emergency Necology Abuse Community Hazard Report. I took a seat in the back, Carlos beside me, flanked by a small but determined crew of neighbors who had, until recently, kept their heads down. Not tonight. Karen started the meeting with a kind of reverent authority, as if she were leading a town hall on nuclear disarmament instead of, a vote to kick out the guy who fixed her neighbor's Wi-Fi. Her speech was a carefully curated avalanche of buzzwords: community integrity, electromagnetic interference, digital vulnerability, neighborhood harmony. At one point, she used the phrase technological destabilization. I nearly snorted. She clicked through a PowerPoint filled with blurry images of my equipment, all marked with red arrows and exaggerated labels. This, she said, gesturing to one slide, is not what community living looks like. The final slide read, Vote to remove unauthorized systems, protect our future. The room was quiet, thick with awkwardness. Then Karen made her biggest mistake. She opened the floor for discussion. I stood, walked to the front with my phone, plugged it into the projector, and pressed play. The footage began with Marcus clear as day, kneeling by my decoy node, cutting cables, visibly confused when nothing sparked or blinked. Then came the audio, clipped from my security feed, him muttering about how this better make the system fail this time. The room shifted. People leaned forward. Someone in the back gasped. I let it play just long enough before switching to the next clip. Two men from earlier that week, the fake inspectors, one nervously laughing when I asked what department they were from. Then I showed the email, the one from Karen to Marcus, her words, If you can gather leverage, I'll handle the votes. You could hear a pin drop. Carlos stood next. His voice was calm, direct. Karen tried to have my federally licensed ham tower dismantled during a flood warning, he said. Said it ruined the view. That tower helped relay emergency messages to first responders. He said. Then the nurse stood, then the firefighter, then the teacher. One by one, they told their stories. No anger, just facts. Karen didn't interrupt. She didn't even move. It was like watching a statue melt. When the vote was called, not a single hand was raised in her favor. Not one person seconded her motion. She didn't lose the vote. She lost control. And for someone like Karen, that was far worse. As the crowd began to murmur, a quiet voice cut through. Excuse me, said a man standing near the exit. He held up a badge. My name is David Tran. I'm here on behalf of the State Office of Emergency Infrastructure. This meeting has been observed under active investigation for potential violations regarding tampering with protected systems and coordinated obstruction. A ripple of disbelief moved through the room like electricity. Karen froze, mouth open slightly like her brain hadn't caught up to her ears. David nodded toward me. Mr. Harper, we'll be speaking with you shortly. And Ms. Bancroft, expect a formal inquiry. Karen stammered something about community intentions and misunderstandings, but no one responded, not even her clipboard crew. The meeting dispersed slowly, like people were waking up from a long, ridiculous dream. Some neighbors came over and shook my hand. Others apologized for the silence. Ruth hugged me and said, "About time someone stood up." I nodded, not out of pride, but relief. The system had held. The truth had landed. But as I stepped outside and felt the cold night air, I noticed something across the street. Karen's car, parked, engine off, windows dark. She was still there, still watching, still planning. Because for someone like Karen, losing wasn't the end, it was just intermission. The following morning, the neighborhood felt suspended in a strange kind of silence, the kind that lingers after something loud has collapsed. People waved again, but it was cautious, like they were testing what peace felt like. The clubhouse meeting had sent shock waves. Word had spread fast. Karen had been publicly humiliated, legally cornered, and worst of all, ignored. And for someone like her, being ignored was the most unbearable consequence of all. I should have been satisfied, vindicated even. But deep down, I knew better. People like Karen don't disappear. They recalculate. Sure enough, by noon, the HOA bulletin board had a fresh flyer. It was her handwriting, cursive that somehow managed to look angry. The new accusation, environmental standards violation. According to the attached statement, the underground relay node on my property had disrupted soil chemistry and was suspected of causing electromagnetic plant decay. She even cited a fake research group called Eco Shield Watch, which, after a brief search, turned out to be nothing more than a broken Wix template and a Gmail contact. I actually laughed this time, not because it was funny, but because it was so nakedly desperate. Karen wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. This wasn't about HOA regulations or plant life. It was a smear campaign with dirt under its nails, hoping that enough mud thrown would eventually stick. But the worst part wasn't the flyer, it was what came after. That evening, Ruth showed up at my door again, this time pale, unsettled, gripping her phone like it might explode. She didn't bother with tea. She just pulled up a set of grainy photos taken from her upstairs window at 2:11 a.m. Three men wearing beige jackets with crudely sewn-on HOA security patches were standing near my front relay box. One of them held a crowbar. Another pointed toward the gutter line where I'd hidden a backup cable. They didn't break anything, not yet, but they were casing it, marking, planning, waiting. "They're not from any board list," Ruth said. "Karen's organizing her own patrols now, private ones. Some of them don't even live here." That's when it hit me. She wasn't just trying to discredit me anymore. She was building her own HOA militia. I called Dana. This time, I didn't sugarcoat it. Karen is escalating beyond community boundaries. This is impersonation, conspiracy, and probable intent to sabotage protected infrastructure. Dana didn't argue. In fact, she sounded furious. "Send me everything," she said. "We're bringing in county law enforcement. No more HOA loopholes." No. The next morning, I met with two officers from the sheriff's department. I handed over everything, the photos, the flyers, the email thread, and the footage from the dummy note sting. One of the officers muttered while flipping through the binder, "You'd think she was running a cartel." He didn't mean it as a joke. That night, I walked to the edge of the neighborhood past the brick monument that read, "Oak View Ridge, a place to belong." Underneath it, on the wooden community board, I spray painted a single word in red, "monitored." I didn't care if it was subtle. I didn't care if it broke a bylaw. I wanted them to know. I wanted her to know she had eyes. So did I. And now, so did the law. 2 nights later, her fake patrol returned, but this time, an unmarked car waited in the cul-de-sac. As the men approached the relay box, the deputy stepped out, badge raised, and within minutes had all 3 detained. Turns out 2 of them had prior records, one for trespassing, the other for impersonating a public official. HOA security, my ass. The fallout was instant. Word spread faster than wildfire. Suddenly, the people who once nodded politely at Karen's memos were calling emergency board meetings without her. Ruth told me the board had demanded a forensic audit of HOA funds. Apparently, Karen had labeled her patrol expenses under beautification initiatives. That explained the brand new jackets and night vision flashlights. And just like that, Karen stopped showing up. She claimed to be taking a leave due to stress. But we all knew the truth. The sheriff's office had executed a warrant on her home office that very morning. The neighborhood was changing. The fear was cracking. But deep down, I knew there was still one final move left on her board, and it wouldn't be quiet. I thought it might end there, that maybe after the arrest, the search warrant, and the legal storm cloud now hovering over her HOA kingdom, Karen would finally retreat, vanish into some gated community far away where her clipboard could rule unchallenged. And for a while, it seemed like she had. Her house sat dark. Her car didn't move. Her name stopped appearing on flyers. The HOA bulletin board, once her personal soapbox, was suddenly just a notice for lost cats and lemonade stands. People smiled more. The fear evaporated like smoke. And for the first time in months, I let myself breathe. But peace, as it turns out, is a fragile thing in places like Oakview Ridge. 2 weeks later, just as life began to feel normal, I received a certified letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. Not a lawsuit, not a cease and desist. It was a formal notice of withdrawal. Karen had resigned from the HOA, vacated her seat, and transferred her property into a blind trust. According to the letter, she was relocating indefinitely for personal reasons. Tucked inside was a handwritten note, 4 sharp words scrawled like they had been carved into the page with bitterness instead of ink. You shouldn't have won. No apology, no explanation, just a final gasp of spite from a woman who never thought she'd lose, but she had. Not because I out-yiled her, but because I outlasted her. And something happened after she left. The neighborhood didn't just return to normal. It evolved. People who had once stayed quiet now found their voice. A petition circled, called for a full overhaul of the HOA charter. New candidates stepped forward, Carlos among them, surprisingly. Ruth volunteered to help rebuild a fair system. We formed a tech committee to create a transparent policy on infrastructure. No more fighting progress, no more weaponizing bylaws. The relay node Karen once tried to destroy now had a plaque next to it, installed quietly by the county in recognition of emergency continuity during wildfire response. Small, bronze, and official. It made me smile every time I walked by. And then came the call. Dana phoned me one morning with news that nearly knocked me off my feet. The state's Emergency Ops Division is issuing you a commendation, she said, for resilience during crisis and for exposing a coordinated effort to compromise public safety infrastructure. I didn't know what to say. I'd never wanted recognition. I just wanted to do my job. But she reminded me that sometimes being quiet lets the wrong people get too loud. The ceremony was modest. A state building in Denver, a handshake, a plaque, a small speech where I talked about systems, trust, and how silence can be a dangerous default. I didn't name Karen. I didn't have to. Everyone already knew. When I got home that night, there was something waiting for me in the cul-de-sac, a small gathering of neighbors. No clipboards, no agendas, just people. They clapped. Someone brought cookies. Someone else handed me a homemade card shaped like a Wi-Fi router. Moose barked like he understood the victory. For the first time, Oakview Ridge felt like a community instead of a containment zone. But the real victory wasn't just legal or personal. It was cultural. The fear Karen had sown for years was gone, uprooted by something stronger than rules, by truth and connection, and the refusal to stay silent. And yet, as I walked past her old house one evening, boarded up and slowly overrun by weeds, I felt something shift. Not fear, not anger, just awareness. People like Karen don't disappear forever. They migrate. They find new boards, new bylaws, new Marcus types willing to break what they can't control. But this time, I wasn't worried. The gate she tried to control now had new locks. The wires she tried to cut had been buried deeper, reinforced, and monitored by more than just me. And someone, maybe Carlos, had nailed a new wooden sign above the HOA bulletin board. Burned into the grain were 3 simple words: never cut wires. Some people fight with fists, others with facts, but the most dangerous fight is the quiet one, where rules are twisted, fear is weaponized, and power hides behind policy. Karen didn't lose because she got caught. She lost because the community stopped whispering and started watching. In a world full of noise, truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to hold the line. Whether it's a wire in the dirt or a neighbor with a clipboard, the things we ignore can become the things that control us unless we pay attention. So speak up, ask questions. Don't let aesthetics trump function, and when someone tries to cut what keeps people alive, don't argue, log it, film it, share it, because sometimes the best revenge isn't a fight, it's a network. and that network is only as strong as the people willing to protect it. Drop a comment if you've ever met a Karen who underestimated the wrong wire.